5:30. This is the meeting of the Financial Planning Committee. We can start with a roll call of members. Scott Stockland. Here. Rob Babcock. Here. Susan Sartori.
Present.
Ken Picard.
Here.
And John Rappa present. We have a quorum. Public comment is allowed and encouraged during an agenda item. To offer comments at any time, please use the raise hand button on Zoom to raise your hand, or if you're in person, the chair will recognize you before any vote, before the agenda item is otherwise concluded. At this time, do we have any public comments? Seeing none, we'll proceed. First item is approval of meeting minutes. April 1st, April 22nd. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
Mr. Chair, I saw April 22nd. I did not see April 1st in the packages unless it was.
It's in the binder. I
It's
didn't
in the
see it either.
binder?
It's in the binder.
Okay.
If we want to digest it and vote on it at a subsequent date,
Well, I'm only one member, so I make a motion, we approve April 22nd, 2024 meeting minutes as.
all those in favor?
Second.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
second, okay. And April 1st? We'll defer it again after we've had a chance to digest it.
Well, Mr. Chair, if the other members have already looked at it and digested it, I would recommend that we move forward so it doesn't get forgotten.
I haven't seen it.
It's in the binder, so I would say we need to take a look through it.
Okay.
I'm looking at it right now. It looks good.
Do we want to vote on it, or,
I say we hold back on, let everybody read it
all right,
thoroughly.
easy enough, okay? All right, next item on the agenda is the Financial Planning Committee mission. And the document you have in front of you is from the town charter, I believe, Jason, right?
Yes, it's from the town code, yeah. That's how it reads in the town code.
Right. I would suggest we look at 5206060 powers and duties in terms of, what's our charter? What are we here to do? The committees shall serve in a research, study, and advisory capacity to the Select Board, the Appropriations Committee, and Administration Officer on short and long-term financial planning matters and to assist in the development of capital improvement programs. We shall have full access to all town records and departmental records. Shall not be, including but not be limited to estimates, projections of income, operational expenses, historic trends, tax rates, the committee's comments on the scheduling of capital outlays and the financial planning strategies and goals for ensuring a 6-year period. The committee is authorized to issue such other reports as it deems advisable. Comments?
I think it's really well laid out from working in another community. It's always nice to know what your role and responsibility is, so you stay in your lane. And I think it's really well written, and I think it's pretty precise.
It's broad enough, too, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's broad enough because it gives other committees in the town the ability to, if they want to ask us for some help, that they can define it in such a way that it works for them and we can work within the parameters they bring forward.
Right.
So I think it's well done, and I understand what we're expected of us.
And it's the type of thing is, if we wanted to change it, it's got to go through the Select Board and probably to a town meeting.
Okay. So when when would be, it says we have access to, does that mean we have to ask for that? Or is it something that would be presented to us?
We play nice, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I do think, as I'm looking through these things, projections of income, I don't remember seeing anything related to that when we were going through the presentations.
And again, we were kind of backwards. So
Understood.
Again, we're trying to bring all boats up to
Yeah,
common level here, so that's why we're starting with this, yeah.
yeah. So maybe for next year, as we get into that, we would see the
Yeah.
income projections,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
I think if we get back on track with that long-range forecasting model that was used in the past, and we use something similar, the town administrator and the select board do, we'll probably be touching on all those things that we didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could I just add that, in terms of like income projections, I mean, we did them for the next year alone, but a long-term financial projection is more relevant to long-term financial planning. So typically, it's been called the Financial Trend Monitoring System, the FTMS. That typically has happened before the beginning of the budget cycle.
Okay.
So like a 5-year future forecast is done with a projection using the CIP as a guide to what the long-term capital needs are, and then we make some assumptions in terms of the operating budgets to see what's going to be available for funds and what kind of debt's going to be needed in the future. So that didn't happen this year, obviously, because we jumped right into the operating budget before having a projection like that, before finishing the prior year's audit and so forth. So we didn't do the look back. Nothing. At this day and point in time, we're just finally finalizing the FY23 audit, which is going to be, the statements, basic financial statements are issued, but the auditor hasn't come before the select board to present yet, which I'm hoping is going to be June 3rd. So I'm talking around in circles, but the plan is to have a financial trend budget summit in July, and that's what I'm here to convey from Tim, is that we're hoping to move forward with a very similar to the financial trend monitoring system presentation and have everybody on board so we can all be looking at the same numbers at the same time in July. So when we move on to that. So that's the kind of plan that administration would like to follow.
Great.
I think this is a good, timely prequel to that for us all. It'll be fresh.
Yeah.
So to speak. Okay. Next item, fiscal policy overview. There is in your binder a tab, Appendix A. It's got like 11 pages. And it's originally, going to the first page, originally adopted by the Select Board in 2009, revised in 2010. A free cash policy was added. So there's a good amount of information in here. Jason, you want to give us the executive summary?
Yeah, so these are the high-level financial policies. These aren't a collection of accounting practices or directions for how to do accounting, but these are the high-level financial policies of the town. Basically, how we would approach using the town's reserves, free cash, and stabilization, what we want to maintain for reserve levels, how the town is going to invest its money. Generally, we have to comply with Mass General Law, so there's a lot of restatements of the laws and regulations we're required to follow anyway, but they could be considered best practices at the same time. In here, this is where there was discussion about the recreation department this year, because there was a call out that the recreation user charges are set to recover 100% of the direct costs. Flipping through here, I mean, these could be changed. They're just guiding principles that the select board has adopted in 2010, kind of based on administration's recommendations at the time. And these are fairly consistent with what other communities have adopted for financial policies. It's basically modeled after the ICMA models that we've used for the FTMS process and the budget forecasts and so forth.
Because I was going to
So
ask.
living with these policies, these high-level policies of not spending beyond our current means and so forth. I mean, these are looked at by bond rating agencies. Having a budget model and a method for preparing a budget is important to bond rating agencies, and we've seen an upgrade during the time that we've used this. We've also been able to invest using the free cash and so forth, the free cash plan, that process, plan out and invest in capital over a period of time that has limited impact on taxpayers during that period of time.
You mentioned ICMA, but I wish Tim was here also, but your knowledge of how other towns' financial management practices and policies are. Is this similar? Is this adherent to best practices? Any idea?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in here that's unconventional, so to speak.
Right.
So it's similar to having a set of policies is what's most important.
And again, this is 14, 15 years old. I recall something earlier this year about revisiting, was it the bylaws in the town? But my question is should something like this be revisited, considering it's about 14 years old, just to make sure there's, it's consistent with where the town is and where we think we're going?
Right. I mean, there's always, like I said, it's a set of guiding principles. It's not, it's not a law that everything in here has to be followed to the letter, but it's a set of, we'll endeavor to maintain debt within a certain set of percentages. The percentage of debt the town has is less than the financial policies, so it's.
Right.
Another example in here is the GASB statements that says that we'll follow, GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, for what we'll follow for our financial statements and preparation of financial statements. I think the last one it mentions is GASB 45, where, I mean, we're into the 80s now with GASB statements. We'll still follow them. It's because they're not called out specifically, but if we were to update the document, we probably would add the more recent references to GASB statements. That's just one example.
Can you help me out here and tell me where I will find the free cash policy in here? What page it's on?
Yeah. I was waiting my turn, Susan.
Okay. I went through 3 times.
There's mention of it on page 2,
Okay.
third paragraph from the bottom. And free cash isn't free? Did somebody say that at town meeting?
Yeah. I knew nothing is free.
They wanted to change the handle?
Do you think the amendment is just not in this little?
Yeah, it may not be printed here.
Okay, all right. I do have a question. We don't have the free cash policy in front of us, but when I was serving before, there was no free cash policy. Back in the day, we paid for a lot of capital items through revolving accounts. That's not done anymore, say, for the fire department and some of the departments. Is that correct? It's more focusing on the free cash?
The revolving funds, there is a the capital items from the revolving fund would, the only significant revolving fund that would probably be appropriate to pay for equipment from would be the fire department's ambulance revolving fund.
Yep.
And we do pay for the ambulances from the revolving fund. There's not really any, the revolving funds are set up to channel user fees that are funding programs that are paid for by the user fees. So there's not really any equipment involved with that. At one point when I started here, there was a revolving fund that was being used for speeding tickets, and that was determined by Department of Revenue not to be an appropriate use of a revolving fund. So that was discontinued. That was the other significant revolving fund that the town had at the time when capital was being paid for with revolving funds. But at this point, the fire department's EMS fund is the most significant fund we have, revolving fund, and it does fund the ambulance purchases.
Okay, thanks.
Does the recreation department have a revolving fund?
They do, yes.
And
It's
not significant?
well, it is, but it pays entirely for programs.
Right, so, but so they collect money and it pays for the programs.
Correct,
All
yeah.
right.
So there's been no capital outlay related to those
Okay.
programs, is the point I'm trying to
Thank you
make.
for the clarification.
And water and sewer, even though that's a separate bill to the residents, they don't have a reserve, yes or no?
They do. They have, they're similar to the general fund. There's an annual process of certifying their reserves at the end of the year. It's called water free cash, sewer free cash, solid waste free cash. And they do pay for capital with their reserves.
All right.
Just a question for you. So whether it's free cash or reserve funds, like what type of investment vehicles do we have these things sitting in at this point?
Well, the town's general fund it's regulated heavily what we can invest our money in.
Sure.
And we generally don't have general fund money in investments per se, but we do have it in, the treasurer does a great job of trying to maximize the investment returns, which is looking for the best interest rates from Massachusetts-based banks. And
So, but I mean, are we permitted, because I know like 3 or 4 years ago, there probably wasn't much of a difference in interest rates, like everything was like close to zero. But now yields even on T-bills and things like that are significantly higher. Like, are we in a position to take advantage of those?
And we do, yeah.
Okay.
We take advantage of, we have money, and the majority of the town's day-to-day cash flows through what's called the Mass Municipal Depository Trust, and it's a money market account, basically,
Okay.
where we see higher returns there than in any of the other bank accounts. But
Okay.
we do have, we try to maximize the investment income through the banks.
Okay.
So cash or cash equivalents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, because right now, like, we have money sitting in, and I'll just say Bank America, and you get 0.25%, maybe 0.5% on that. You can get 5% on money markets, even short-term
Yeah.
treasuries. So it's a significant difference.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
just curious if we take advantage of that, or if you just let it sit in a savings account, because
Yeah.
the banks typically won't come to you and prompt you to do anything better unless you ask them.
Yeah. And again, there are.
I give credit to the treasurer,
Okay.
Lisa. She does a great job of looking at these interest rates and moving things around and making sure we're living up to our agreements with the banks for.
Okay,
I mean, we have some
awesome.
specialized needs with online banking and so forth, but basically she maximizes what we keep in the depository trust to maximize our investment income.
Okay.
And that's money that flows into the general fund. Comparison of multiple years, like you said, there have been years where it was 0.25% or,
Yeah.
1% that we've earned for returns, and the depository trust is around 5%
Perfect.
currently.
Okay.
And I know, I don't mean to go on too much of a tangent, but there was one year, post-pandemic, where our general fund's interest income was somewhere around, it was in tens of thousands of dollars, and it was close to $1 million last year.
Yeah.
So that offsets the,
Yeah.
the tax revenue and other things that come into the town.
Yep, perfect. Yeah.
I think, Scott, you said something earlier that is highly regulated,
Yeah.
right? This town money, zero tolerance for risk.
Right.
Right, that's really what it comes down to.
That's the guiding principle that we
Right.
use here is security, liquidity, and yield. Yield is last. It's the last principle we try to get. And so
In the Massachusetts, the investment policy process went up, and it always worked out very well for us.
We're not
That's how we-
parking in cryptos. We're not parking it in cryptos.
Right.
No?
Yeah.
So without naming names, how many different banks do we deal with?
I want to say, maybe 10.
10. A lot more than I thought.
In the municipal banking is very different than the.
Commercial banking.
In personal banking, where they're not gonna dupe you, because it's very competitive, and every few years you have to go out, right, to bid on the banking relationship. It's, you're not gonna get duped like you were talking about by a bank that's trying to take advantage of it. Municipal business is very competitive.
I mean, basically, we typically have more money in the bank than a typical business would on a day-to-day basis, because, our tax levy here is, it's millions of dollars.
Sure.
So they want our business. The bankers are going to treat the town well, and, yeah, so you're correct about that.
You mentioned the treasurer. How often does the treasurer come before either the Board of Selectmen or Appropriations? Is there an annual meeting, or?
Well, she,
You make a report, or?
Not typically. I
No,
mean,
okay.
I think she'll come to the appropriations committee when
Okay.
the budget is up. but-
Just wanted to know if anybody's talking to her in person, but, okay.
Well, I do on a daily basis.
Oh, I know you do. I mean, on the advisory boards or the select board.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? No? FTMS.
Yeah, like I said, we're hoping to have this meeting in July.
That's it?
That's it.
I thought you'd kind of show through what we've got. You've had a peek at this with some of the capital things presented by police and fire and the DPW. But kind of what's out there, and if you looked at it closely, you see what's planned or forecasted for the next fiscal year out there. We've had this for how many years now?
The financial trend,
A number of years, on my understanding.
you know, yeah, it's been,
It's
about
been a
10 years
while.
or so.
And there's a 6-year lookout. And so, you know, when you've got certainly major capital things like a new building or equipment and things like that, you know, you've got it out there, and you saw, I questioned some of the department heads when they came in, that having had last year's numbers, some of them went up, and for obvious reasons, it's inflation or whatever. A couple things went down. It's like, really? Wow. And some stuff moved out a year. So some of that may be a bit fluid in terms of what's on there. So when you look at these, where is it? Well, the tab CIP, capital budget. You know, you got the fiscal 2025 capital budget there. Police, fire, DPW, highway, water and sewer, schools, half of it. And that just stretches out into the next 6 years, 5, 6 years. I would think that at this July meeting, you'd put that up and kind of
Yeah,
give people.
so one of the major differences and one of the more challenging things that's come up this year, as opposed to prior years, is that there wasn't anything significant in the 6-year outlook. It was just equipment replacement for the most part, and there's some big TBDs that were in to be determined numbers that were in here that were just carried as zeros in the past. Like, for instance, you know, the town hall building here. As those numbers are beginning to develop and some of these things are coming up on the horizon, the trajectory changes a little bit, where last year, in the 2022 FTMS process that happened, and that was the last time that we had the presentation. It was December 2022. Kind of the only thing that we had modeled in that 6-year outlook period was the fire station, and you know, right or wrong, the number at the time that was used was $18.5 million. So now that number has changed significantly going forward, that's going to change the trajectory and the projections going forward somewhat, significantly. But you know, as some other things are being considered, like the town hall potentially being at White Cliffs, or, you know, those processes are moving through the planning phases and feasibility studies. Peasley School is starting to come into the mix, and what do we model for that? So it's becoming more of a challenging exercise to do. And along this process as well, another challenge has been the change in administration. And I'm waiting to have a period of time to work closely with Tim on some of his ideas, because he's had some different ideas about how to model these things going forward. So, you know, it's obvious we had in our operating budget and our planning to do our capital plans, it's obvious that we've had enough money to fund the capital plan this year. We had to do a minor amount of borrowing, which is nothing compared to some of the big building projects that are on the horizon. You know, for like the This year, we're issuing money for the tight tank at the DPW garage. That's a new issue. So we have some short-term notes, but they're not significant borrowing in comparison to what's going to be considered for some building projects that are coming up. As we look out through the planning phase, obviously, we have unused levy capacity. That's the amount under Proposition 2.5, and the law, what the law says we're allowed to raise taxes every year. So we've had, at the start of the budget process, we had $4 million. Obviously, it's no secret that went to, with the development of the '25 budget, that went down to $2 million. So at that rate, we'll be out of our unused capacity and in 2 years, need an override if we continued, budgets increasing every year at the same rate. Again, that's the point of the trend monitoring system. In the meantime, I think the administration is looking for ways of conducting some money-saving operations, like, for instance, leveraging the ARPA money to put in LED street lighting to reduce some costs. Are those going to be significant enough to change the trajectory of using $2 million a year? Well, probably not, but I would hazard a guess that the operating budgets are probably not going to go up as much in the next year, starting with this year as a FY25 as a base. That's my prediction, but again, we need to run through some of those assumptions and models when we work through it. Another idea that's come up is the potential for, we do some capital outlay within the operating budget, which is the pavement management and some other things. So those are things that could be considered to be added to the CIP, and it's, again, we're just moving sources of funding around, but there's some creative ideas in terms of spreading that over time rather than annually being part of the tax base.
I do recall when Scott Charpentier was in front of us earlier, talking about the pavement management and the ratings across the town, and it was 80-some-odd%, and I think one of you asked,
72.
Yeah, it was in the
72. Thank you.
70s.
Yeah, it's 72.
I've been through a lot of numbers today. One of you asked, and I think he was looking for 300,000 and change, what would it take to get that to 80 or 85?
Scott, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was probably close to $1 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that would be not a one-time shot. It's probably,
yeah.
you'd have to keep up with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
Just like curious, like on the revenue side for the town, obviously most of that money comes from taxes, but there's also some government money that comes in as well to help pay for things. So if you look at it overall, what percentage of the money that the town gets comes from taxes versus other sources?
It's somewhere around 80%.
80%.
So when you mention the intergovernmental sources, we get about $6 million a year from the state and
Okay.
state aid. That typically goes up somewhere between 1% and 2%, whereas taxes have
Yeah.
filled in the gap on what our needs are.
And how often do we, okay, so a lot of the tax money, obviously, we all think comes from residential, commercial, industrial. How often is that reevaluated, like properties are reassessed and to keep pace with?
Oh, there's annual market adjustments that happen.
Annual.
We have a 5-year revaluation, that's the law, that the state reviews our numbers more closely every 5 years.
Okay,
But annually, there's a market adjustment that's done to statistically keep up with the real estate market.
okay,
And cyclically, the assessors are required to visit every property every 9 years. So every property in town has to be visited
Okay.
within 9 years. So they're on schedule to stay on.
All right.
that.
Sorry for all the questions.
That's
Is
okay.
there a general rule of thumb in terms of the assessed value versus the market value? Like it's almost always lower.
Right, and again, just, one of the basic things is the reason behind that is that the tax value is set by state law, and that's the calendar, the January 1st of the calendar year before, and that's the assessment date.
Okay.
So the taxes you'll pay next year are based on January 1st of this year.
Okay. All right.
Jason, there are other revenue items too. Restaurant receipts, new car,
Excise tax.
excise taxes and other things. What else is there?
Local receipts.
Local receipts.
Local receipts include everything like building permits. I mean, the biggest part of local receipts is, and again, I didn't know we were gonna get into these numbers, so like, look.
Hey,
I
you're the
can try
numbers
to-
guy. Yeah.
But I'm just going off the top, I'm going off the
Ballpark.
top of my head on the moment, but like the biggest part of our local receipts are, I think we raised it from 4 million to 4.4 million this year. And so that obviously defrays the taxes that get raised. So,
That presents a nice bump.
the 400,000 was directly related to the investment income increase. So we just increased our budget. So that's off on the top end. It's the money that comes in above budget obviously feeds into free cash at the end of the year. But at the beginning of the year, if we've increased the budget for it and the tax rate is set, the taxes will be lower as a result of our local receipts being raised up. But the biggest source of local receipts is the motor vehicle excise tax. And I think that's $2.6 million of the four.
Okay.
There's 12,000 plus cars in this town.
Something
I
like
asked the
that.
assessor
Something like
back in
that,
March.
yeah.
Yeah, I did some numbers. I was looking at percentage of those that are EVs. So 12,000 plus cars, and he corroborated that between his records and the registry.
Yeah. I have one more question about taxes. So I believe that Northborough is a town where residential, commercial, and industrial all pay the same
Correct.
tax rate. Are there other charges that, let's say, an industrial property would pay over and above the tax rate that make it more valuable to the town than a residential property with the same value associated with it?
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, that you're bringing up. They would probably pay higher building permits if they were developing
Okay.
that parcel in any way for business use. They also pay personal property taxes on certain equipment. There's a lot of things that are exempt from personal property as well for manufacturing businesses, but there could be significant personal property taxes as well, whereas a residential parcel would not pay any personal property taxes.
Okay, but there's no like industrial surcharge or commercial surcharge over and above?
No.
Okay.
There's not. There's a classification hearing that happens every year where the select board makes the decision to either split the tax rate or not split the tax
Got it.
rate.
Okay.
And I would just mention too, that the back end of this is that it's frequently viewed that the businesses use less services than the residential parcels. So, for instance, the most expensive or the highest cost within the town's budget is obviously the school department, and there's no
Yep.
students being sent, but whereas the businesses and everybody benefits from the education.
Yeah, Jason, if I can jump in, I think the business evaluation is usually higher. You know, if you look at the property per acre, it's higher for the business than it is for the residents. Just the valuation, so by that means, they're gonna pay more. And they're using less in the community.
Yeah, understood. And then communities that do have a tax rate differential between commercial, industrial, and residential, are the commercial, industrial, are they typically higher than residential or lower?
I'm not sure of any case where it would be lower.
Okay,
It's
Generally
almost always higher.
There are some communities that offer tax incentives to move into the town. They'll defer taxes for so many years to get the business in.
yeah,
And hopefully they stay and they don't leave at the end of their term.
Yeah.
But that is one of the ways of getting businesses to come to communities.
got it. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's, I mean, I'm not gonna do a good job explaining this, but that's one of the major differences between like a community that operates as a city versus a town, where a TIF agreement that Ken's talking about would have to go before the legislative body, which is town meeting, to approve. A city, it would just involve the city council approving a TIF. So
Okay.
our neighbors, Marlboro, for example, they they have a split rate, and they frequently approve TIFs frequently to entice businesses to come to town.
They did that with Fidelity probably 30 or so years ago. There's a huge campus over there that Fidelity had occupied.
there.
Yeah, and then Fidelity moved those people out of town, and there was a tiff over it.
Yeah.
So one of the marketing points of having a single rate is to say, well, we don't need to offer you a TIF because you're in effect already getting one by
Yeah.
coming to a single rate account.
I'd like to ask if we could go back to meeting in July, doing the long-range monitoring, whatever it's called, and getting together with all the parties. What's the actual, since we didn't really get to go through it last year in a normal type of year, what's the normal budget process? What happens? Who sets the goals for what the budgets are going to be increased by, and how do we start all that? Where does it get going?
Well, it usually starts with that process back, we look out at the, what would be an affordable increase, and that's a very debatable term of what's affordable in terms of, a tax increase for the year. And it was kind of, under the charter, it's the town administrator's budget, so the town administrator will lead us through the trend monitoring system presentation. And it's kind of an interesting process, the 22, the last time that it was actually conducted. It was kind of an interesting process because the school committee had put forward a budget that was much higher than the numbers that we were modeling in that projection out into the future. So they came down. I think the numbers, obviously went up from what we presented, but we just pick a random number and try to show it. Say the town budget will go up 3.5%. Well, there's nothing saying that it has to be 3.5% when we go through all of the things, when we present that budget in March. That budget hearing happens with the select board. So typically it's guided by, I'm making a long answer to this. It's an administrative process that leads up to, but with guidance from the select board. And typically in the past, the guidance has been pretty broad in that it's been level services with, with an eye toward affordability.
Okay. And then for capital projects, it's the certification of the free cash, and then you start to work out what you can hopefully
Right.
finance this.
Right, typically we close the books at the end of the summer, and then we submit our information to the state to certify our free cash. I mean, coming into July, we'll probably have a good idea of what free cash is going to be certified at, and can start making plans. We can't spend the money until it's certified by the state. But that would play into the capital plan, is obviously knowing what our free cash number is, and then developing the free cash plan.
Well, it sounds good that you're trying to meet in July, because I think we'll be ahead of the game, starting the process off in the fall.
The beginning of the fiscal year.
Yeah, but before, the monitoring always happened a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
later in the season, didn't it?
December generally,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that starts to ramp into get everything done and packaged for town meeting in April. But yeah.
I think as well, another reason for the December date was that was typically when the audit was finished for the prior year.
Okay.
Jason, on the FTMS, let's say you have a piece of equipment scheduled a couple of years out for capital, and you come into next year, who is responsible for marking to market that? So let's say it's a piece of equipment for DPW or a police car, an ambulance or whatever. Who updates that? Is it the department head or is it your group?
It would be up to the department to
Okay.
update that. They need to update that. Typically, the directions go out to them that they update their financial plan for the
Coming year?
for the coming 6 years that they submit for.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
And to that point, John, I mean, the inflation's been a huge factor this year. I think the fire truck that got approved, that we, had a combination of funding sources that went into paying for that, it went to 1.25 million. And it had been 900,000, I
Last
believe,
year was
originally in
900.
the prior year. cycle. So, I mean, that's an incredible amount of inflation that's happened in.
And I
these
think I
items.
read in the last 2 weeks that Grafton approved an article for a new fire engine down there for $2 million. Not a tower ladder, a pumper. I was like, $2 million? Ouch.
The availability of the lead times and the availabilities it's been a problem it's been identified. I don't know what the solution is going to be to that beyond waiting for
Right.
equipment.
Right, and we've heard that from just about all the departments, I think.
Which I think is an important point to bring up when everybody talks about ARPA funds. I think some people think that that would be the easy fix to get it from ARPA, but we're now finding that we'd never be able to meet the federal restrictions for how you spend the money. So I think it's important for people in town to understand. We've looked at that, but it's not viable.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, when the ideas were coming up to pay for a fire engine through ARPA, I don't think anybody knew that the delay was going to be 2 years.
Yeah.
How much flexibility, if any, is there in sort of setting the replacement cycles for a lot of these vehicles? Whether it's a fire truck, a police truck, DPW trucks. I do remember one of the presenters saying like, well, it's set at 7 years, and if we go longer than that, then it affects our insurance premiums and things like that. But is there any flexibility? Like, could a town say, you know what, instead of cycling our DPW trucks every 4 years, we're gonna stretch it out to 5? Right? Because quite frankly, like on the fire station, not the fire station, the fire department, like this is our second $1 million truck that we bought back to back. And you just wonder if like, wow, could we push something like that out 1 more year, maybe 2 more years? I don't know if that's reasonable or not.
That's kind of why I asked for that information in regard to all of the capital equipment in all the different departments, so we could start to take a look at how many we have, what their useful life is, and for questions like that, you start to put the puzzle together and see if there's any way that you can move it around a little bit. At least we'd be a little bit more educated when we're asking the questions to the department heads.
Yeah, I mean.
Scott, I think that is definitely a function of the available money, right? If the money's not available, like in your household, you put things off. Right. So this idea of, oh, every 7 years we gotta change a fire truck, I think it's more of a convenience. If they have to send it out, get it repaired, that's what they're worried about.
Yeah.
But we also have mutual aid agreements with other communities.
Yeah.
So we are not ever gonna be without a fire truck.
Yeah.
Another town will help us if we need one.
Yep, and we've done that with other towns around here too. like
Yeah, no, it's a common practice.
Berlin, whenever the woods were on
Yeah.
fire, we were there. Yeah, so I'm just asking the question because I think that maybe that's a opportunity to lessen sort of the regular expenditures, if it can be done.
And I don't want to focus just on the fire department. I mean,
No.
the police cruisers, the
DPW
DPW,
is
all,
exactly what I'm
everything.
saying.
You heard residents bring this up
Yes.
during town meeting, you know.
I want people to know
think-
we're listening and we're asking the right
You know,
questions.
The multi-year plan, I mean, we don't know that the truck that's going to be replaced in 5 years is definitely going to be bad at that point. But in terms of the Public Works, I know the director's put together, he has a vehicle replacement plan whereby he replaces a vehicle and then changes the chassis over to to be a paving vehicle afterwards, and like they get rougher use
Yep.
as time goes on. So there's typically, the useful life is used up by the end of the 10 or 15 years that we hang on to some of this equipment.
I think most of the questions that will end up being asked and we get the answers to, we'll find that things have been managed quite well, but questions are being asked, so I think we need to move forward in looking at some of those things.
And even like last year, I don't think we knew. The fire engine the town voted on to replace last year for $900,000, that decision was pushed out because of COVID. And we didn't probably fully comprehend that there's a 2-year wait for that. And I think the chief had mentioned something around town meeting that, it's down to about 1.5 years. And I forget how long he said that the one that we just approved at town meeting, the second one is going to be at least 2 years. So some of these lead times are just egregious. And that's also the timing of, expenditures. So,
Yeah, so.
cash out the door.
Yeah, so we have borrowing authorizations for both of those vehicles. We'll, we go through a process annually where we've been reissuing a note every year until we go to the market to lock in long-term debt. Because the interest rates are high, we haven't wanted to lock in long-term debt until we need to, so we've been issuing one-year notes, and today was the sale of the town's bands, where we renewed what was existing. We pay them down, we pay down some of the principal on them, so that basically $4.2 million of notes sold today, and the interest rate we got was 3.8%. So we were expecting around 5%, so it's better than what we predicted, but in the past, people were basically giving us money for free for less than 1%. So it's a big
And that's a competitive bid.
yeah.
Right.
But leading up to this, we didn't borrow for the $900,000 fire truck because we knew we weren't going to get it before the end of the year, this fiscal year. So we haven't incurred any borrowing costs yet for that.
When we have a large purchase like that, what are the terms that, okay, there's a 2-year lead time for a piece of equipment, it's 900,000, do they want X amount down, they want stuff in installments, how does that work?
Right, under mass law, we're not allowed to prepay for anything.
Okay.
So we have to pay for goods or services we actually
So
receive.
it's COD.
So the point of the authorization is more to have the authority to sign a contract
Yeah.
to get the equipment. So
Right.
we've ordered the equipment, but we haven't outlaid any cash yet to.
So when it lands, they get paid in full?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it's cash flow, it's timing, it's revenue timing, expense
Yeah.
timing, okay.
And the high school debt, 2 more years, was it?
Yeah,
2025?
2027
27.
is the last year for the ad ren debt.
Okay,
Off the top of my head, I don't remember for the complex, but the complex is less significant.
okay.
And there's another 4 or 5 for White Cliffs, right?
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Cash flow. How do you keep all the balls in the air?
Well, we have quarterly tax billing.
Right.
Cash flow was a much more of a problem when towns only issue 2 tax bills a year. We have issue 4, so we get a pretty big infusion of money quarterly. So this town, it's got decent reserves. We have had sufficient cash flow. We don't need to borrow short-term to pay our bills. So we're in good shape with cash flow. It's a luxury of working for a well-managed and town with resources.
So you have an accounting system. I presume there's a function in there for cash flow projections, things like that, right?
Like I said, we typically, we do them on a very limited, the cash flow projections on a very limited basis because we have enough money to, the appropriation process allows us to have the money available to pay all of our obligations.
I understand, but if Tim or the select board says, what's going out the door next month, how easily can you pull that up?
Oh, fairly easily, yeah. The thing is that we wouldn't, the money doesn't flow out the same way. It doesn't flow out all on day one.
Yeah.
So, and again, if the point you're bringing up is the significant fire station project, should that be
No, I'm just
that be
general
approved,
day-to-day.
that would change the trajectory, make it.
General day-to-day timing of revenue and expenses.
Yeah, so sometimes money flows in faster than it's going out, sometimes it flows in faster than it comes in.
Right.
So it's,
The reserves give us the cushion
the
to
reserves give
manage
us
that.
sufficient, yeah.
Okay.
And those reserves are there because of the policies that we have established in the town.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Capital improvement and priority rankings. We went through some of the discussion of priority rankings when we went through this coming into town meeting. You have the capital budget in here in the tab, which should not be a surprise to anyone, right?
Seen it before.
You've seen this before. And our report is contained in here also with commentary on general committee comments, free cash, et cetera, ARPA money, Community Preservation Act, but, where is it here? What is marked as page 50, you got the 4 priorities. If you will remember this from our discussions in March. Priority 1, projects that involve correcting a safety or health issue, need to meet a federal or state legal requirement. Priority 2, projects that are necessary to maintain the town's current building equipment and infrastructure. Priority 3, projects are required to increase capacity of existing facilities to accommodate the increase in growth of town. And priority 4, projects that are designed to modernize and upgrade existing town facilities. I think they're pretty self-explanatory.
So, to the chair, I guess, I had some initial questions when I first got on the committee about the priority. I just want to be clear if priority 1 should be funded before priority 2. Is that, when I look at priority, I'm saying this is more important than that? Or are we saying this expense falls within this category?
Well, my recollection is the capital projects that we reviewed were either a 1 or a 2. I don't
Well,
recall any
that's
3
what
or
we named them.
4s.
But I'm saying, so if we look at the 1s and the 2s, is our opinion that a 1 should be funded before a 2?
Well, let me see if
That's,
I can.
when I think priority, that's what I think of.
Let me take a poke at that. On one hand, we did have debates on some line items, whether it's a 1 or a 2, and I think the draft we were presented with was put together by the staff, and so we mutually agreed to change the priority.
Right.
Should a 1 be funded before a 2? I think if you only got $10 in your wallet and you want 2 projects that's gonna cost $12, you've got to figure out where you're gonna spend it.
Well, again, that's my point. It may be semantics, but, or maybe my OCD. Priority means this is more important than that.
I think so too. Like, I understand what you're saying, and like, I felt the same way, like, sort of, there were some projects that might have been rated a 2, but maybe were more important than a 1. But as I read this now, priority 1 is projects that involve correcting a current safety or health issue. It's hard to get more important than that, right? And category 2 is projects that are necessary to sort of maintain the town where they are. So if something's falling in disrepair, I can see how that can be a 2, but maybe not a 1, where number 1 is like, I don't know, like, let's say this building became like a health hazard, like it had
The leak in the roof, the leak in the roof.
Something like
The
that.
leak in the roof of the existing fire station. It's got a blue tarp over it.
exactly.
That's a 1.
Something like that.
It's just something you can't put off.
Right.
And also, let's not forget, priority 1 is also to meet federal or state mandates. It's just something you can't close the door on. You're gonna have to do it, and you're gonna have to tell your kids they don't get to go to Disney World this year because this state told us to do
Right.
something.
Right.
So, I think that's the way I look at it.
Again, it may be my semantics.
Yeah.
But as I move forward, if we're gonna say it's a priority, I'm gonna say the leaky roof takes precedent over a vehicle, period.
Yes.
So through the chair, I would just add that I think there were some things that were looked at as a 4 per se, and the example I would give would be that the DPW's hook lift truck. And I think internally, I think the director agreed with you that that was a lower priority than the rest of them, because the intention was that was a new piece of equipment that was to enhance their services. And then when a priority 1 under, that would be under his supervision to conduct, which was the police station siding, came up, that's what he looked to, and that's what the committee, through its deliberations here, agreed to recommend passing over that article, and I think that's how that decision came, because he looked at
No,
what
I
was the.
I understand that, but as we move forward, and right now, I think, at least, I'm amazed at how much free cash we have, right? I'm just amazed from my experience. We may not always have that much free cash. At some point, we're gonna have to make a decision, this versus that. And this is how we're gonna do that, right? And it kind of, that was done with the DPW vehicles, like, okay, that's a nice thing to have, and maybe down the road, or you can sell it somehow the way, but, I just want to make sure I understand what that priority means. We're gonna say, this is more important than that, so that should get top priority over funding versus something with a higher number.
And not to confuse people, the Community Preservation Act articles from town meeting, the priority was NA. So,
Well, yeah, because we don't have any say with that.
Yeah, they don't prioritize them.
Yeah.
I think it gives a goal and a benchmark for the departments to understand what our thinking is, so that we are in balance and we can come to consensus as we make a capital plan. And certainly, we just need a reason to justify our decision. And if they can talk to us and explain to us why it should be something that we don't, we might agree with them. But like you said, someday there might not be enough money and we'll just have to go for the thing that needs to be fixed.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this also shows the residents that there's a structure, there's, in some of these, a sense of urgency, a priority one, for example, and why something was ranked or prioritized that way. Ultimately, on a capital issue, it's going to come down to town meeting, yay or nay. And, we recommended not spending the $200,000 for the First Parish Church steeple, and town meeting approved it.
Yep.
And I think appropriations also voted no on that, too, yeah. So,
I think we try to do the best we can to take the politics out of the decision-making, but then it goes to town meeting and politics are there. But even when we're in here in this room, there's going to always be some politics, too. But that's why we have guidelines to keep us on course.
no one's shy on this committee, which makes it interesting in terms of just, people have opinions, people ask questions, that's why you're here.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Any other questions on capital programs?
Do you feel better about that?
And
You feel better
John,
about that?
I would just
Oh,
make
I
a
just wanted
mention that
clarification.
within this guidebook, I think if you flip to the miscellaneous section, there's a listing of all of our capital projects and the most up-to-date accounting
Okay,
we
good.
could produce for that.
Good, yep, there's a fold-out spreadsheet there?
Yeah.
Good, okay. What you see also in there, under miscellaneous, it's an executive summary of the fire station FAQs. There's probably 4 dozen or more FAQs on the website. And every time a question is brought up, like there was in the community meeting a couple weeks ago, or an email from some resident, the chief and his team have done a good job updating that FAQ section. So, can we move on to ARPA? So you have an accounting as of yesterday of expenditures to date, fiscal 2022 to date, and a balance. We were, use the word, granted, awarded, given about $4 million in 2 tranches,
Yeah, 4.5 million.
4.5, and is $2,687,000 remaining, is that correct?
Well, there's 1.8 remaining unallocated, but of the balance that's unspent from between the projects that have been allocated and unspent, there's 2.6 million.
Okay. And I recall asking this last year, that balance is sitting in an interest-bearing account, yes?
Correct, yes.
All right. There's a huge list of ARPA requests. that it sounds like from my discussion with Mitch Cohen that the select board has got to get to prioritizing those within the guidelines of when the project needs to be committed and ultimately funded.
Yeah, so this became, as you guys all recall, a big issue at town meeting where somebody, and I forget exactly what the project was, but somebody basically got up and made the statement that, why can't this specific project be funded with ARPA money? And whether it was Mitch or somebody else, like, I think they responded the right way. Like, you really need to look at holistically. Like, it would make sense in a vacuum, and maybe it was the fencing thing around the pickleball courts or something like that. But yes, I mean, you could argue that you could use the money for that, but then you want to look at all the other things that are on the table and sort of then prioritize. So that might not make the cut if you have all these other things that you want to do.
I think some people would like to rename ARPA, ISDN. I smell dollars now.
I think that we're getting so close to the deadline for the end of this year and not knowing what's ahead. And I don't think enough people understand all the restrictions that there are.
Yeah, and I think this money, you guys probably know more, this money has to be spent before the end of the year, contracted before the end of the year.
Committed, Jason?
Correct. The term that used by U.S. Treasury is obligated.
Okay.
And the definition of obligation means that in order for a contract to be issued and in order to be placed, there has to be bidding that happens under
Okay.
procurement law. So it's December 2024 is when the obligations have to be fully in place, and then 2026 is when the payout of those contracts or the run out of those contracts goes through.
Which takes a lot of things off the table that some people want, because it's too late to get something under contract.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, well, there'd have to be lead time in order to do the bidding to publicly procure a big project.
I have a question. I'm not sure that you're the right person to be able to answer it, because it's really monies that the select board decide how to expend, and they work with the town administrator. But in the memo that we received, there's a number of projects there that are also in our CIP. And I was wondering, is that a strategy, or is it just an oversight that there's overlap there? Or are they hoping to take some of the things out of the CIP to loosen it up for next year's budget? What do you know anything about why there seems to be an overlap?
I'm not sure how many items are overlapping, whether that was intentional or not. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I know one thing in particular was there was a project at one of the parks that was proposed for restrooms, and that was in the capital plan originally, and I think that the intention was to put that forward as an ARPA request. So that may have been pushed out in the capital plan. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. I think the price was $850,000.
Could that even get done?
Well, for us to go do bidding, I mean, the timeline would be tight, but we could probably do bidding and obligate those funds by December.
Okay.
Is there a minimum dollar amount associated with projects that the town's required to go to bid on?
Well, okay, so the standards where you have to do record keeping start at $10,000.
Okay.
Then there's tiers that go up as we get into higher dollar projects. So typically, okay, so the complication with ARPA is that under public procurement laws, the state and the feds, if you follow state procurement law, you're also complying with federal procurement law. The one key difference is that the list of exemptions that are frequently used under mass law don't exist under federal law, which means that you do have to do bidding for a lot of the things that, you wouldn't have to under mass general law.
Yeah, that's where the strengths come in, I guess, yeah.
I guess I will take you to the memo from Tim dated May 8th. And he has under the DPW facilities and immediate repairs is the replacement of air conditioning units at the police department. Now, I know that we have within the CIP an extensive plan being put through by the facilities, and I thought that the HVAC was being handled there. And the brick repointing at the fire department, I thought we were all set with that. So is that also something that they're thinking of using ARPA instead of?
I don't know the answer to that question,
Okay.
to whether that overlaps with what was already approved for the brick repointing.
Okay.
I think the answer may be that this is additional stuff that was needed beyond the capital plan, but
Okay. Because, I mean, they've got security system and camera upgrades, so we know is in the CIP, but they're just trying to bring it forward.
It
soon.
sounds like
Yeah,
it's got to
I
be
think-
scrubbed.
This memo.
Yeah, it's got to be rationalized relative to what was done. It seems like there's stuff on there that,
I mean, this is just the short version, not the
well,
big,
yeah, the
long.
long
Yeah,
version,
yeah.
pages, yeah.
But, yeah, to that point, I think that those things, as they come forward, the administrator will refine the requests that come
Okay.
before the select board.
All right. And is there a request coming forward from the schools? Because I heard at the select board meeting that there was another ARPA request from the schools. Is that true or not?
I don't know.
Okay,
Stay tuned.
I guess so.
All right, are we ARPA'd out for now? Yes? I put a line item in here, grants tracking, I call it methodology, and I think someone asked this in one of the prior meetings. I've noticed over the years that the department heads, they're pretty wired relative to knowing where there are grants in their respective areas, whether it's the police department or the schools or whatever. And they've managed to sniff out and apply or get in the queue for them. Some of them are competitive, some of them are not, but, how do the departments, or do you keep track of, the grant?
Well, through the accounting system. I mean, if there's a grant, I set up a separate set of accounts to track the.
But if someone knows that, well, there was one for the dog park, that there's a grant for that, who keeps track of wrestling that down before it gets to that stage? The department heads?
The departments, yeah.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
So there's no one central place until it gets
So I would say this.
real?
And I'm going to say this like a town accountant, but the Mass General Law that governs it, it's Chapter 44, Section 53A. And that law says that the Select Board approves all expenditure of grants, gifts and grants. So what that means in practice to us is that when a grant award is received by a department, any department can apply for a grant without anybody's permission or advice. But before they can spend that grant, they would need approval from the select board.
Right.
And so typically, our practice here has been when an award is received for a new grant, they go before the select board and request approval to spend the funds.
Right. But from an ongoing practice, in terms of just knowing one's out there that's being applied to, it's not in any central place until it gets real.
Correct.
Okay.
So if there are any grants being written for capital projects, when they come before us, will they at least maybe report to us that they're considering grant monies? And so we'd have that in the back of our minds as we move forward?
Well, that would be important, yes.
Okay.
Grants are one of the funding sources in the capital plan that we identify in the plan. So hopefully that will be identified that is what we're counting on. I mean, I know in terms of a lot of the grants from the past that have affected the capital plan, most of them have been public works related. And so a lot of times we will have reported the project is $200,000, but our share that we're appropriating is $50,000 to show our 25% match of that grant per the requirements of that grant.
But we're also going to see a lot coming in from the master plan implementation for all of the things that the planning department will want to do. I have to say, we're very lucky. We have a very talented group of people that seem to know how to get out, find grants and write them and get awarded. So we're in a lucky place, but I just would like to be able to know that we're all on top of understanding where all this money is and where it's coming from.
And some of them, they are competitive, we've been told. An example recently with the Whitney Street purchase, the DCR was interested in potentially contributing $200,000 to that. And it sounds like it's not a done deal, or it's got to go through a process. So when that 200, if and when that 200 lands, where does that go relative to the expenditure for the acquisition that was, did we close that deal Monday?
Well, I think that the first requirement of the purchase and sale has happened. We did generate a check to
Okay.
the attorney that, per the purchase and sale agreement. I think the closing's scheduled for this summer.
Okay.
So, I mean, the full amount hasn't been
But
transmitted
when,
yet.
but should we get that grant from DCR, how does that come back relative to the expenditure for this project? Does it come back to free cash or what? How will
Oh,
that
well,
be?
well, the way that would work, I mean, it was funded with CPA money, so
Back to
it would, basically, when you get a reimbursement for something, it goes back to where it came from.
Okay, okay, got it. All right. All right. Grants? No, okay. Regional school agreement overview.
I know, did we get a copy?
I don't think so.
I don't have one in my
think so.
packet, so we'll just
Yeah,
get that.
again, I'm pretty sure that the superintendent forwarded that to us back when that was, we were talking about it more. And I'm pretty sure he forwarded us the Algonquin's regional agreement in full. I just didn't have a chance to look for it and
All right.
print it out. for this
So we can bring that back to the
Yes,
table
I
for a
can.
subsequent meeting.
Yep.
I'm sure that will,
Just out of curiosity, what is this? Is this a, almost like a cost-sharing agreement between Northborough, Southborough based upon enrollment, or?
I think that's the short answer, but I could be mistaken. I don't
It's a
wanna speak out.
contract, for sure.
Right, basically, between the two towns for the governance of the regional district.
Okay.
Like voted on by both towns.
Right.
One of the reasons that I'm very interested in it too is that a couple of years ago, our town voted for the school committee, the regional school committee, to have a stabilization fund. And Southborough they've gone a couple of times to Southborough and they have not voted that. And they've actually told them straight out, we have the money, you can just come to us if you need it. But when you're working with a second party that might not have that same frame of mind, it is better that there would be a stabilization funding. They'd have assessed it to both towns. So they're still stuck between a rock and a hard place while they're trying to put together a really sound financial policy for themselves. So I think it's important we look at it and have some questions, possibly.
And just roughly, is the enrollment split, like, is it 65-35 on the Northborough side? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's in that neighborhood, Scott. It's like somewhere between 60-40 and 65-35
Okay.
in that neighborhood.
Okay.
But so to that point, the regional agreement covers the amount that we spend in addition to what's required by law that we spend on education. So
Okay.
the method that the assessments get calculated, we get assessed by the regional school district. So we're sending them, we don't pay their bills, but we send them money quarterly for our share of the assessment of their operations. So the way the assessment gets calculated is we are required to pay a certain amount toward educating kids of high school age at the region. So that gets backed out, the state calculates that amount for Northborough and Southborough, and then the amount that's above and beyond that is what's covered by the regional agreement, and that's
Okay.
strictly by enrollment, so that those costs get shifted by enrollment.
Okay.
So coincidentally, not to, belabor this point too much, but coincidentally, the amount that the state says that both Northborough and Southborough has to pay for their students going there is almost equivalent. So in effect, it's almost basically broken down by enrollment, like our relative enrollments from both towns is how the assessment breaks out.
Got it.
The
Okay.
first agreement was just a straight percentage, and then when we went to do the building project, the two towns wanted to open up the regional agreement, which you have to, take to town meeting and do that. And so now there's rolling averages that are used for some of the calculations, and so
I
that's
think
what's
Greg
there.
Martineau articulated that.
Yeah.
if not when he was with us here at town meeting, in terms of what the split is and the ratios.
And a lot of people may not actually realize it, but the expense of insurance and health insurance and all the rest is within their budget, not carried by the town of Northborough as it does for the K through 8.
All right. Seemed like almost 2 years ago, there was a facility tour scheduled. I forget if it was Melican or one of the K through 8 schools, or both. And at the last minute, it was canceled. I forget why. And it was open to us and appropriations and or the select board. And we didn't pull it off. So, is there an appetite for a tour of educational facilities, whether it's Algonquin or Melican or whatever, or all the above?
I do. I do believe that the school committee actually has the policy that they have to follow, that they're supposed to bring in our committees to have a tour of the buildings so that they keep us apprised of what everything looks like and how it's going. But, yeah, I think for me, it's not just the school facilities. I think for us in the fall, we've got a big job ahead of us trying to decide how to help to move the fire station project forward. So I think that we should definitely go see the fire station.
The existing one.
The existing fire station, so we truly understand some of the problems that are inherent there. So we can visualize it, we can listen to them.
Yes.
And then I do think that also the next thing that's going to be coming up is the Peasley School. I think we should really get over there and take a look at that.
100%, because it's hard for us, like, they'll just come and talk to us and say, there's a hole in the roof and we got a tarp over it.
Yeah.
Your vision of that and mine are
Different.
maybe very different. So I
So-
think that would be very helpful.
And the police station too, with the siding and the nails.
And the
Sure.
broken window that hasn't been fixed
That's
yet.
been fixed, I think.
Has it? That's great.
Yeah. I don't know who did that, but anyway. Police station, fire station, Peasley, what else?
That's plenty.
I mean, that's a lot, but.
If we could try to get that done sometime before the fall, that would be good, and then just get into the regular cycle with the schools
Yeah.
for going through all their schools.
What if I reached out to the chiefs and then Greg Martineau, and, maybe if you guys suggest some dates, go have a visit.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm sure they're pretty welcoming.
Do you guys feel you need to see kids in a school building, or would you be fine touring a building without the students?
I'd be fine without it.
Okay.
I'd
Probably be a
prefer
lot
without
easier.
it.
Okay. Okay.
I know what kids look like.
All right. That will make it easy. We can go over the summer.
All right. So we'll work on that. So, next meeting date. Got some actions here. Some of it is the April 1st meeting minutes. Facilities tours. I know Angie sent out an email. Are you thinking about a date for that financial summit yet? You mentioned July.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to be away for a chunk of July, so. Is there a
I
date?
would say July 23rd was the date that was kind of proposed, but calendar.
That's a
behind
Tuesday?
Ken hasn't been-
That's a-
There's a calendar on the wall behind you, Ken.
Oh, is there?
It's a Tuesday.
It only goes to June up there.
You're not trying to make eye contact with me?
It's a Tuesday.
I wasn't staring at you intently. Is that
So-
Tuesday?
If in fact that's the date, let's everybody be cognizant of that for scheduling purposes, and if for some reason we can't make it, make sure we have quorum or an attendance there. We'll reach out
July
to John
23rd is a Tuesday.
also.
Tuesday, okay. I want to say, I think that was the date that was proposed, but.
We'll double check that.
It's still very,
Fluid.
not.
We'll check that. We'll double check that. Last time we had one of these, it was at the library because we needed big enough room for people
Okay.
to congregate.
To be determined.
Yeah. Any other business?
I would love to broach the subject of the school building committee. I know that we cannot serve on a school building committee, but as we've seen the evolution of being a liaison to the fire station, I think it's something we ought to consider proposing and asking if that could happen and if it would be helpful. And then seeing if we get support for that, and we want to do it as a group and ask for it, we
There's
put
the
somebody
issue,
forward.
you know, town hall will be another large capital project. The question is, do we as a committee feel we should have a seat at the table as a liaison and understand how the project evolves?
Sure.
You know, we can bring it back. It's early enough, early days. It's something to think about, to bring back to the next meeting, maybe.
But they actually have a building committee in place now, so that would be.
Is it fully stocked? Is it fully?
The select board voted all the members. I do believe you had to have it in by the end of May, right?
Yes.
It was ratified last night,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I mean, Monday.
And it had to be the state by the end of the month, right?
So Tim chose who was going to be in it. I don't know what the deadline is, but the board ratified Tim's decision
Yeah.
on Monday.
Yeah. I believe that they actually have to have the whole process done by the end of May.
Okay, so school building committee, does that mean we're
Beasley,
building another school or just a committee that talks about the school buildings and the?
Don't forget, the town approved $900,000 for a feasibility study, and some of that is, do we need to renovate or build a new school? Demographically, are
Okay.
the attendance going up or down? Another alternative is, you know, is it feasible to merge two schools? There's a bunch of stuff all on the table. And so it's early days. Just like with the fire station, there was a feasibility committee
Got it,
back
okay.
in 2019.
Okay.
It's early days. But the town hall committee also is there, and that'll be another large capital project. So it's something to think about.
the state has requirements that, you know, certain things have to be done for this feasibility study.
With
And like you
schools, certainly with schools.
With the schools, yes, and as you stated, all the things you stated are the things that they'll be looking into. So if any one of us would liaise with them, we would be at the ground floor of understanding what they're looking at and what the complications are in the issues,
Mm-hmm.
so.
And be able to bring that back to this group.
For
in
us,
terms
yeah.
of what's going on, what's coming down the road. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would be happy to do that, especially since was appointed by the school committee. So.
I would be thrilled.
Let's,
I was
again,
hoping.
let's think about it, and next time we get together,
Yeah.
we can talk.
Okay.
I don't know, process-wise, if we nominate someone as a liaison, we agree on that, what the process is with Tim, and then the select board or the actual committee. I don't know what the process is, so we'll try to get some
Okay.
detail on that.
Okay.
so we
But
know
there's
what's going
interest in
on.
this committee, it sounds like, and
Okay.
there's actually somebody that volunteered, right,
Okay.
Johnny on the
All right.
spot, so.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, like they did bring up the subject during the last meeting I had with them about getting me involved in sort of their budget process
Okay.
and what they're looking to spend money
Good.
on. And I said I would be happy to attend those meetings, so.
Very good.
It could work out that we kill two birds with one stone, but
Okay, very good.
unless
All right.
someone else
Thank
really
you.
wants to do it.
Good. Any other business? Any other business?
No.
Okay.
Not for me.
Good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Any
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is ended at 6:56.
Thanks, Jason.
Yep, nice job.